What is up, everybody? Shavua Tov, Chodesh Tov. At least when we're recording this right now, it is Rosh Chodesh Nisan, just a few short weeks before Pesach, and joined here with my co-host Jake, who I had the privilege of actually meeting in person for the first time this past week in Beit Shemesh. And I like a lot of Israeli meetings go. We're sitting in Aroma enjoying our coffee, where all of a sudden we hear a siren, and we go outside, see the Iron Dome, boom, boom, work its magic, and we're joined by some random Israelis who, are new friends in a random miklat. But we continue doing our thing, and we're not going to let that stop us. And it felt very fitting for our first meeting, when we talk a lot about Israel and Aliyah and the beauty, but also challenges of living here.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny. A lot of people don't know this, but me and Alec don't know each other that well. We've had a total of maybe 3 hours of conversation, so we know each other as well as we could with given those 3 hours. But yeah, we had our first meeting just a couple of days ago. It was great.
Exactly.
Hopefully not the last.
Yeah, Bezrat Hashem. The majority of our conversations have been recorded for the whole world to see up till this point. So it's nice to have some just time to schmooze without the pressure of the camera being on us. But we have some exciting updates. We've been really enjoying the podcast so far, and so far we just sent it to some friends and family. But we have two big updates. The first is sort of around the format of the podcast. And you'll experience that here, and we would love feedback on how it is. We definitely want to keep the conversations unscripted, but we had this idea, since we talk a lot about these three different pillars: Torah, then Israel, just like Israel Aliyah, and the last pillar being, I guess, just like tech and business. So we thought it would be really cool to each week go through a different topic and sort of dissect it from each of those three lenses. So today we're going to try doing a topic that I hear a lot of people asking me about, and that's finding a job, in end of March, April 2025, and sort of talk about that from a Torah perspective and Israel perspective. If you're an Oleh Chadash looking to make Aliyah, finding a job specific to you, and then lastly, just with business and tech, maybe products or software, just advice we would have in the market. So that's super exciting. And then the last update before we get in here is we're thinking of opening up a WhatsApp community or a WhatsApp group. I know if you're listening to this, hopefully you're not cringing because you're already in a million WhatsApp groups that get archived after about a day. But we're thinking it could be a really cool place to just, have a lot of like-minded individuals, probably start as admin only, just collecting feedback, but also sharing new episodes. So if that interests you, and I guess if you're listening to this, you probably know either Jake or I personally, or have a way to reach us, let us know. Happy to throw you in there. And yeah, anything that I missed before we jump into it?
No, that's it. I'm very excited about the new direction and the community, especially. It's sort of a quasi community, right? Because it's mostly one way, but we want to be accessible to anyone with
Yeah.
questions. You can send us voice notes. I'll try to transcribe it before digesting it. But yeah, very excited about that. And yeah, it's the beginning of Nissan, which is the beginning of everything. So this is
Yeah,
all new
exactly.
beginnings, beginning of the Jewish people, new job, getting a new job, moving to Israel is a new beginning as well. So excited to dive into what it's like trying to get your first job in Israel.
Let's do it. Let's do it. Finding a job. What should we do first? Should we do Torah? Should we do tech? Should we do Israel? You pick, and let's go there.
I think just trying to find a job, you know?
Trying to find a job. Exactly.
Yeah,
Okay,
just
you're
from
right.
the
You're
tech
right.
business perspective. Yeah.
You're
Your
right.
Gestalters perspective, I would say.
I like that. I like that. Um, cool. I have some thoughts, but you want to kick us off with something? I know you just made Aliyah recently. I know you have your own thing, so you probably weren't looking for job, but you're probably looking for clients, right? And I'm assuming that that's similar, right? Networking with Israeli entrepreneurs. Anyone doesn't know, Jake has a design agency. So finding a job and finding clients, I think there's a lot of similarities there.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, I did start working with an Israeli startup for a few months before making Aliyah, and I thought I was going to continue on with them
Mm,
after making Aliyah. They had some strategic changes and stuff, and I didn't end up moving on with them after I moved to
Mhm.
Israel. So it was a big shock for me because I thought that I was coming to Israel with a job, but it didn't end up working out. So I do have some insights though on getting a job at an Israeli startup and what it's
Mhm.
like, working with Israelis, and then obviously getting clients and stuff is very similar. So um, where should we start? I guess one thing that comes to mind is that it's really hard to get a job at an Israeli company before you move to Israel. A
Was
lot of
about to say
times
that.
you're gonna dive into that.
I was going to dive into that because it's so spot on, and everyone asked me about it, and I thought it would be different in my case. And it's extremely difficult unless you're working at an American company that also has a presence in Israel. Like if you're at Facebook or JP Morgan or whatever, and they have an office in Israel that you can transfer to, that's a different story. But even very qualified individuals have a hard time. I think in a lot of people, I asked them about this. I'm like, I already have my flight. Like I'm already getting ready to book. I think a lot of Israelis, maybe it has to do with what's going on right now. They don't actually believe like you're going to be in Israel or like making Aliyah until you're actually there face to face.
Yeah, yeah. I even had a lot of people ask me, "Why are you moving to Israel?"
Mhm.
From who's working in Israel when I was trying to network before coming over. But they definitely want to see the whites of your eyes, is what I
Yeah.
was told. And it's
Mm.
for sure. And even if you work at a company like Meta or whatever these big companies, Microsoft, even then a lot of things change. Like you sometimes
Yeah.
have one boss, it's like it's cool, but then you get there or it's a month before and it doesn't work out. Funny enough, I know a lot of people who got jobs pretty quickly after they moved to Israel, but
Uh-huh.
it wasn't the ideal job for them. I think a lot of
Mm.
people felt pressure to take that first job, and
Yeah.
they were obviously highly qualified, but it was really the second job where they found happiness. So I think that's
Yeah.
another interesting thing.
Interesting. And one thing that I'll add is even though it's very hard to find a job before you make Aliyah, what you can do, which will make finding a job a lot easier, is networking like crazy. And that's something
Hmm.
that I did. I found I don't know if I should say this publicly, but I found access to like this Airtable, which had a bunch of Olim in tech in like their Calendly link. Very impressive people. I just started booking meetings left and right with like very impressive people. They didn't even know who I was. It could have been a bad look, but I guess I was very friendly and people. One important thing as well, people want to help New Olim. Like Israelis want to help New Olim, and then especially people that have made Aliyah already that have been living here. They especially I think want to help New Olim. Like even someone in my shoes right now, even though I've only been here a year and a half, anytime someone reaches out thinking about making Aliyah, I'm always happy to make intros. So, like, the way to do it is like one connection, turn that into five connections. So, like, at the end of every call, this is practical advice, not just for Israel. At the end of every call that I have, whether it's for work or a different business endeavor or networking, I'll always say, like, thanks so much for the call. Do you think there's anyone else that I should speak to or would be relevant? And that's how to turn one call into another three or five calls. And that's especially in Israel, Dafka, which means like specifically, the whole ecosystem is so interconnected and everyone knows each other that you could easily start with one connection and end up with like 40.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say that I actually found that list as well, the Airtable list. So I think it
Nice.
is public. It is through an organization called Nevo,
Yeah,
which just
exactly.
specifically helps Olim in tech, whether it's before they get on the plane or after they get on the plane and connecting people. I
Yeah.
found people to be super helpful, kind of like what you said, and willing to reach out and willing to connect. And
Yeah.
I've even had people where I had conversations and interviews and stuff reach out 3 months later and be like, "Hey, how's it going?" And I thought that
Yeah.
was pretty unique. I mean, we live in a world of WhatsApps and emails and everything, but people care.
Yeah, 100%. I think one of the other things that's so important to talk about because it really shocked me, and I think shocks a lot of Olim, is there are basically no rules here. And what I mean by that is the way business is conducted is a lot more informal. And that should also drive your job search. What do I mean by that? It is completely normal in Israel to like WhatsApp message like a hiring manager on like the status of your application or just like cold like reach out to someone or like it's very different than like in the US where you have like your HR manager and like you have a certain round of interviews and it's very clear to you what the process is. In Israel, a lot of times you make your own role and you make your own process. Like a lot of my friends who have found jobs, it hasn't been like they saw a posting somewhere, they reached out to the hiring manager, they had these interviews. Some companies in Israel for sure do that. A lot of opportunities here are you meet someone, maybe they work at, they're the CEO of a startup, you come to him or her with different marketing ideas you have. You're like, oh, I used to work at this startup. I really think it could be cool to do a go-to-market movement, like a motion this way. And like you tell some ideas and they're like, wow, that sounds pretty interesting. And you're like, yeah, like, I'd love to try it out. And then they're like, okay, cool. You want to, come on for 3 months as a consultant and we'll pay you XYZ. And then if it works out, you end up staying. And like that is something that is a lot more common in Israel. And my first role here actually was at a company called Receive. Alex Oppenheimer, a buddy of mine who's an investor, hooked me up with one of his portfolio companies, founded by Ariel Blum, who's like nicest guy, founder in Tel Aviv of this fintech company. But things here are very opportunistic. Like a bunch of their employees, it was a small startup, were in Miluim, were in reserve duty, and they needed a few people for like a few months to stay afloat. So I came in there, helped them with their go-to-market motion, and it was like really good when I landed, like before I found like a permanent opportunity just to get in the door and meet people. So a lot less formal here in Israel is the point that I'm trying to make.
Yeah, absolutely. So you were coming at it from a marketing perspective, right? Where you're bringing marketing ideas to CEOs and hiring managers. But how could you do that as a product designer or developer? And so
Yeah.
one of the ways that I've done this in the past is you can go to the App Store and you can see reviews. You can see what people, actual users, are writing about a business. Or you can go on Glassdoor. Now, take everything with a grain of salt, but maybe there are some challenges you see there, or just doing a Google search or a Perplexity search,
Yeah.
and just seeing where you can add value. I wouldn't, and this goes for everything. Don't just reach out and say, "Can I have you want to have a coffee?" Like it's
Yeah.
not enough value for them. They can buy their own coffee. They might be really nice because you're making Aliyah and you want to move to Israel, and that maybe excites them that more people are coming to the country, but bring some other value.
100%. And I think this, people ask me all the time, like, what is my number one piece of advice for someone searching for a job? And the thing that I tell them is it's not like you need to go above and beyond what they're asking of you in terms of when you're applying for the job, and like that should be your standard. So like what I mean by that, especially in Israel where people are very action oriented, I'll give you a few examples, right? You apply to a sales role, okay? The sales role might ask you, sales role at a startup, they're probably going to ask you for your resume, your maybe a cover letter, and like in a lot of cases that's it, right? What you should be doing if you actually want the sales role is like use Apollo or Zoom Info or one of these tools, find the email addresses for the CEO, for the sales manager, send them a cold email, right? Like
Yep.
actually show them your skills, send them a cold email about your value, send them a personalized video, actually do the job beforehand to show them what you would do. And another thing that I like to do, and this is what I did for the role at Beehive, is you want to, hiring is a very risky thing. You want to do your best to de-risk them bringing you on, because ultimately they're taking a chance on you. So if you sort of break down, like, this is exactly what I'm going to do in the role, this is my 30, 60, 90-day plan, I think that is like something that everyone should be attaching to their job description, whether they're, if they're a designer, marketing, sales, engineering, whatever it is, like find out as much as you can about the company and actually pitch, not just yourself, but pitch how you're going to fit into the core initiatives of that company. And that should be standard.
Yeah, yeah. And then you got to take that into an in-person meeting and try to meet as much as the team as you can.
Yeah.
Because a lot of it is if they see that you check all the boxes and you have your plan and they know you're smart or whatever, and they seen your experience, but then you got to get along with people, right? I
Yeah.
think a lot of people think that hiring is this like really systematic thing. Pretty much comes down to, do I like this person? Can I have a beer with them? Can I have
Yeah.
a coffee with them? And does it look like they have good experience? At least
Yeah.
that's what I found. Should we talk about resumes at all, or LinkedIn, or other tools to kind of reach out?
Yeah, I think we should. I talk about this a lot for me. I think in 2025, the way to stand out and like your resume is your social media. Like I'm very, if anyone follows me, they know I'm like very active on LinkedIn, also on Twitter. And I think it's the easiest and best way to differentiate yourself when you're applying to a job, is to like get your voice out there. And I'm just meeting people each and every day. And I think people are more inclined, like people are getting so many resumes and like all the resumes pretty much look the same. Maybe one's designed a little bit nicer, maybe one like has a more impressive school or whatever. But like ultimately, I think if you have a LinkedIn presence and you're posting and you're sharing your thoughts and ideas, same with Twitter, or it could be, if you're an engineer, same with GitHub or any of these sort of, platforms. I think that is like a non-negotiable and will put you miles ahead of anyone else. It's a vulnerable thing to start posting, but that would sort of be my thoughts there. But I'm curious what you think about that, and then also the whole resume CV thing.
Absolutely. I think you're saying that like the better your online brand is and your presence, then the less important the resume is, right? Because the most
Exactly.
important thing is actually having conversation with someone who is going to be your manager or a recruiter at one of these companies. Um, One of the thing I would say is a big difference if you are applying to jobs between what your American style resume looks like and your Israeli style. So
Mm.
I know in America, if you have 10 years of experience, maybe you have 2 pages already,
Yeah.
maybe 3 pages resume. People will not look at your resume. They'll look at your resume even less in Israel. They'll
Yeah.
spend less time on it than in America. And you have to realize that a lot of people reading these resumes, English is not their first language.
Yeah.
And so be very specific. Don't write a lot. Talk about actionable results. If you join the community, I will send you my resume from 7 months ago and then the new resume I
Nice.
made. And I got a lot more good feedback on that.
Yeah.
Part of the kind of segueing into your thing about the online presence, I went to a bunch of people I worked with in past companies and stuff and said, "Hey, can you write me a recommendation?" It could just be
Yeah.
2 sentences, 3 sentences, whatever. And when I went to present decks, and I even made it part of my resume, like another attachment, just reviews. So it's like a bunch of people, their titles, they work in AI or whatever, and they said it was great to work with me. So I
Yeah.
found that was a tool that was also really helpful when getting interviews.
Nice. That makes a lot of sense. One thing
Again,
on that.
going to your point about de-risking.
Yeah, exactly. One thing on that point that I just want to hit on, and this is a little bit of a hot take, so get ready. I really think, and maybe this is coming from a privileged perspective of where I've met a lot of people, but I really think that if you in this day and age apply to a job without a referral or a recommendation, like you don't really want that job. Like it's a hot take, but I think especially in Israel where people are so willing to help Olim Chadashim, not just that, the whole tech ecosystem is so small. You can get like say I find a job at Facebook that I looks super interesting. I am almost positive that if you message about 10 people on LinkedIn, which doesn't take so long, say, hey, I'm an Ole Chadash, I have a background in this, like, would you be willing to like chat briefly? One of them is going to respond to you at least. And it just completely changes your chances. I mean, Beehive, like, it's gotten more competitive since I was there, but Beehive, globally remote company, their last position they opened up, which was an opening, they were hiring one person, 3,000 applicants. Like do a percentage of like what that it's like many more times more competitive than Harvard, right? And like I'm not saying I got the job, like the job was less competitive than one I applied to, but it's not because I'm so smart or overqualified or whatever. It's because I took all of these steps into account, right? And I found someone, I got the referral, I built out that plan, I tried to de-risk it, I met with as many people as possible. And for Olim Chadashim, applying for jobs in Israel, that's even easier because people are so willing to help you.
Yeah, I don't even think those job forms work anymore, even if you put a referral in. Literally,
Yeah.
I mean, I haven't. I've gotten some calls and stuff. It's funny, like I have gotten a little bit, but I feel like it's not really worth the time to reach out in that way. But I've
Yeah.
had people just call me in Hebrew and be like, how good is your Hebrew? I'm like, probably not good enough to
Yeah.
work with you guys.
Yeah.
But But yeah, no, I would agree with that hot take. It's also just different.
Yeah,
2025 is different. There's a lot of talent on the market. You definitely need to connect with people who are at these companies, and I know a bunch of people now at these tech companies. I'm sure you do as well. So again, plugging the community, but really it's just
for
because I
sure.
love to help people. Join it, and if you want a connection to some of these places, reach out to me.
100%. Yeah, I echo that. One important thing that I want to touch on too, and this is like gonna transition over, but we'll be able to move freely throughout. Something that I commonly hear all the time from people is, this unwillingness to make Aliyah until they have their job lined up, which I understand it's a
Mm,
very scary thing, right? Everyone is in a different financial situation. So, like, if someone, doesn't have any money saved up or whatever, or doesn't have, support coming from somewhere, it might be different. And there are some occupations where that is incredibly difficult, right? Like all my doctors listening to this that spent, $250,000 on medical school or whatever, like to come make Aliyah and work under like, public medicine or whatever. I don't know the details there, but obviously that's a little bit more difficult. But what I will say is, and this is something that I thought a lot about because I had to leave my job in America at a company called Ramp, which, was doing really well and everything. They're still doing really well. But I had to leave that job and didn't have something lined up. The one thing that kept giving me chizuk and really, I guess, like strength and encouraging me is I thought to myself, as an Orthodox observant Jew, I thought, what who basically decides about our parnasa? Like who decides what job we have and how much money we make? Anyone who's like a truly like believing Jew knows there's only one answer to that, and that's God Himself. And I said, okay, so like I have that part down. That's part A. And now the second question to ask myself is, what does God want of me? Where does God want me to live? Does He want me to live on the Upper West Side, or in Miami, or in LA, or does He want me to live in Jerusalem? And I'm not gonna convince everyone so hard or pitch everyone so hard, but for me at least, it was very clear that God wanted me to live here in Israel and raise my family here. So I sort of put two and two together, and I said, okay, if God provides for me, and He's going to be the one that finds me a job that helps me earn a living, and He wants me to live in Israel, I feel pretty confident that if I go and take this chance and move, I'll be rewarded. And since then, thank God, I have a job now that I absolutely love, from Israel, and professionally, I feel like I'm in the best place that I've been. So it's worked out nicely there.
yeah, it's a huge point, and I think it takes a lot of faith. But and it can be hard sometimes, for
For
sure,
sure.
to make that jump. I would say it kind of actually relates to the Israeli style, but also to what you're saying, is that things can move very quickly here. So just if you
Mm.
have that bitachon, if you have that faith, things can just get in line very quickly. So, for example, a lot of these interviews, they're not 5 rounds, right? It's
Yeah.
like maybe you meet the hiring manager, you come into the office, boom, you have a job. So I found that things can also move a lot more quickly. Just we talked about this in one of the previous episodes as well, where people are calling and it's very direct and it's
Yeah.
kind of loose, but because there's a lot less of that structure, you kind of see God's hand in every single thing that's going on.
Exactly. There's this one thing. I've been thinking a lot about this recently. It's more, I don't know if it's related directly to finding a job. It's related to like working in a job, but I think
Mm.
it's very connected. And it was a shir I was listening to, and basically the rabbi was talking about how Yosef Atzadik is the only person I believe the Torah calls matzliach. The Torah says ish matzliach.
Mm.
And Rashi comments that like why was Yosef Atzadik's like why was he so successful? It's because everywhere he went, he had Dvar Hashem. Like he was always speaking about God, and you see that even like it says he was successful in prison and Beit Potiphar in the house of Potiphar. He was successful obviously with Paro, but anytime he was asked about like his abilities, even when Paro asked him like I hear you could read dreams, he always denied it and basically said, no, like Hashem reads dreams and I'm able to do that, right? So, one, I think like there's a big takeaway there in terms of, the more amunah and bitachon, the more trust and faith you have like in God and this whole process of finding a job, which could be very, very difficult, the better it will turn out. But the other thing that I was thinking, because a lot of times people will ask questions like, should I go to an interview wearing a yarmulke? I think it's a less common question probably in Israel, because thank God a lot more people here are wearing kippahs or are used to that. But the shiur basically was saying, and the point is that Jews in the workplace, and Orthodox Jews, are not successful despite the fact that they're religious, right? It's not that, yeah, I'm still a great employee even though I take off early on Fridays, or I'm still a great employee even though I don't work on the Chagim. But this rabbi was saying, no, you are successful because of those things. You are successful because you take off early on Friday. You're successful because, and like changing that despite to because, especially for me, where like the company that I work at, most people are not Jewish, let alone Orthodox, right? So having that mindset shift for me and like why I'm successful there and like tracing it all back to God at the end of the day has like worked wonders for me. And I think it's like something that I've been really thinking of lately.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And that actually relates to what Yosef was as well, right? He was like the one Jew, not the one Jew, but he was the viceroy in Egypt.
Yeah.
And it said that his kids were still religious, the best people, even though they grew up in Egypt, which was very antithetical to everything Jewish
Yeah,
at the time. Um,
exactly.
but that's a beautiful mindset to have, and I think that bitachon is kind of a balance, right? The more you feel like it's not in your everything is in your hands, the more you kind of let Hashem drive and navigate and let the connections happen. The more you think it's all on yourself, your hishtadlus, then the more you're gonna have to do.
Exactly. Exactly. I completely see that. And I think these are all things that require a lot of emunah and faith. Moving to Israel, getting a job, growing into Judaism, wherever it is you're holding. So I think they're very related.
And I think Kiddush Hashem is a big thing. Like wherever you
Yeah.
go, whether it's in America or Israel, how you act is, especially if you're wearing a kippah, is really really important. It's also a big responsibility,
Yeah.
right? I don't know if have you had come across any challenges there or, um,
Yeah, it's a great question. I also think it really one thing I've seen on the Kiddush Hashem front is the more unwavering you are and sort of like proud you are, the more people respect that and appreciate that. So yeah, even working for Beehive again, amazing company, amazing team. I feel very lucky. But like when we go on offsites, which we do about once a year, and we're all together, right? I'm obviously like a little bit different, where we're eating and dining at different restaurants, and like they're very nice and inclusive. They give me basically like a card where I could order things, and right, I'm ordering takeout from the Glock kosher places, and it's coming in tinfoil and everything, and working with the Chabad, and leaving a little bit early to daven mincha or whatever it is, right? So there are these differences. But I think almost everyone at the company, without exception, has really been open to that, and they've even asked me different questions on it, and it's this year it's even a little bit different. I'm thinking about this a lot more on Shomer Negia, which is now that I'm married. I was Shomer Negia before I was married, but like now that I'm married, it's like even I think it's an extra responsibility for me. So, I'm even thinking about different ways to bring up with my team ahead of time, like, hey, by the way, like, for all the girls on my team, just, out of respect, just to let you know, like, I only touch my wife, so, we could do an air high five or whatever. But I'm thinking about ways to bring it up before, and I'm sure everyone will be receptive and open to that. And I think they actually find it very, they find it very respectful. So I think being over communicative, but also being very strong and unwavering in your beliefs, that to me has worked wonders.
absolutely, I think the more confident you are, like in your religiosity, the more it comes through, and everyone respects that. If you are kind
Yeah.
of wavering about it, then I feel like you get more questions and stuff like that. But yeah, I remember I was on a construction site in Tennessee with a team member, and I was like, it was time for mincha, and I was like putting in my phone like, where is the closest synagogue? Very hard to find. I ended up he first of all he thought it was amazing. He was like, yeah, absolutely, like stop and go pray. But I remember I was praying outside the synagogue because the synagogue was locked in the middle of the day.
Whoa.
But I just had to get done, but he was like very supportive of that. But yeah, it could be a little bit weird. Like for example, making brachot like in front
Yeah.
of people before you're eating and stuff, and then you kind of feel weird if you're not like really saying it. It's like, what are you whispering before you eat?
Wow.
Even these little
Yeah, that's a good one. It's for me like, and this is, maybe that's what I'm going to try to work on this year in public meetings because I think we're all, use
that's a hard one, right?
we're in meetings. Yeah, like that is hard because that's really like people are like, what kind of wizardry are you making on your Apple, right? But yeah, it's that's a good one. That's something that I'm going to work on. It was funny last time I was when I was at the offsite this past year with Beehive. We were sitting in they took us to like a very nice steak restaurant. It was awesome, and I was like, okay, like we're going after steak, so like I'm gonna look and see if there's any kosher steak in the area, So like they're eating steak, I'm eating steak, everyone's happy, and I ordered the steak, and it came. First off, it's like a very confusing thing explaining to the Uber Eats driver to like drop off your food at a restaurant. They don't always like understand the concept there, but they dropped off the food and came sealed in a bag and everything, and the person sitting next to me, um, a good friend of mine, he saw like the food come and everything, and first off he's like, "Could I try some of your steak?" And I'm like, "Love you, dude, but no. Like, I'm sorry. I only have this little piece of steak. Like, you have your whole 5 course meal." But he accepted it.
They all say,
Uh,
"Oh, it looks so good," right?
I think I might have given him a little piece. I don't remember, but he was like to me, he's like, "Oh, like let me get you a plate," and I'm like, "Oh, like I'm just gonna eat out of out of here," and he's like, "Let me at least get you like a knife. Like how are you gonna cut that?" I was like, "Oh, I'll be fine." Like, and he's like, "Fine, let me at least pour you a glass of wine," and I'm like, "Oh." Can't do that either. But and the waiter actually came over to me and he whispered, he's like, "Don't worry, I'm Jewish. Like I know the rules. Like I'll like watch out for you." And then I invited him for Shabbos, but he told me he was working, unfortunately. So yeah, it's a great conversation starter with all your employees. But I think in Israel, this is actually a good point to bring up. A lot of times, the people that are most receptive to it unfortunately are the ones furthest away from it. Like non-Jews, all the non-Jews that I speak to, pretty much without exception, are extremely welcoming, extremely open with it. I think sometimes, unfortunately, you have issues with people who are aware of it and might not be doing it themselves and cast judgment, and like that's a whole other ball game in terms of like dealing with.
Yeah, I think some people think that you're sometimes reverse judging them, which is so far from it.
Yeah,
But it can make people feel uncomfortable. But again, I think going back, whether you're in the U.S. or Israel or anywhere else in the world, just being confident in what you're doing and
yeah,
not and taking yourself out of the picture. Just saying like this is to spread God's glory,
yeah.
right? And that's all you can do. And I think it segues into a nice point. Today is Rabbi Nachman's birthday, and
Happy birthday, Rabbi Nachman.
happy birthday. And he said that his most important lesson was lesson 282, a Zamra. And this is one of the greatest mystics that ever lived, teaching crazy stuff. We'll get into it in the podcast too.
Yeah.
But he said his most important lesson that he ever taught was 282, and that's to judge other people favorably. And I think that's a lesson that you can take with you, whether you're in Israel or in the U.S., just always looking for the good in others and looking for the good points in yourself. And that will
Sure.
take you through. And he goes into the details. He says it's not that you're just changing your own perception. No, you're actually physically, metaphysically changing reality when you judge another person
Insane.
favorably and you lift them up. That gets into quantum mechanics and quantum physics. And maybe we will get into that.
Yeah.
But in a very practical sense, you actually elevate other people by judging them favorably. And so when you're in these work situations, That's what you have to do all the time. And I'm talking to myself too. I'm not preaching to
Yeah.
you. I'm like giving myself encouragement to do this.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, Zamra is such a beautiful Torah, and I think about it, and we'll probably have to have a whole episode dedicated to that. Um, one thing I'm curious about, because I want to make this as practical as possible for people listening. What would you say, like you were you just made Aliyah, say you were looking for a job right now, what would be like the actual tangible steps you would be making in order to find that? Like if I think we should break it down for like the listener, like what they should be doing, like maybe a 1 to 5, or they could already be in a role, but they're like looking for something else. Like what would we be recommending?
Okay. I will recommend one thing. I think everyone knows the basics of work on your online presence and have a good resume. And I said I'll send you the format of mine that I got interviews from. The main thing is being clear on what you want.
Mm.
I know when you get into a situation where you move over here and you say, "Hey, I'm good for any software engineering job. I'm good for any marketing job." And the truth is, there are many marketing jobs out there that you will be very happy at, and many that you will be very unhappy at. And so, part of the prayer aspect, I know we talk about practical, but this is definitely practical.
Mhm.
Praying for a job that you're going to be happy at and bring value to,
Uh-huh.
and narrowing it down into what you're looking for, be very specific, right? So if you have industry experience and you enjoy that industry, only look for jobs within that industry. You will look a lot more attractive as a candidate,
Mhm.
right? I find that in 2025, it's much harder to change industries, right? Because there's so much talent on the market
Yeah.
that people are like, you seem great, but there's 20 other people that contact me that already worked in this industry for 3 years. So I
Yeah.
think get clear on what you want, what makes you happy, what gives you energy, and even narrow it down to team sizes and location, and
Yeah.
just focus on that, because reaching out and having conversations in person, this stuff takes a lot of time. But you can definitely tailor your case studies and your unique story and your unique value. It's much better to put a lot of effort into 10 applications and 10 meetings than 1,000 all over Israel. There are many, many opportunities. God's not going to, say, "Oh, you're the only person who came to Israel and there's no job waiting for you or
Yeah.
no way to make money." It's there. You have to believe it's there, but be clear on what you want.
Yeah, that's a good point. I'm going to challenge you if that's okay. I
Challenge
think
me.
that makes sense for a lot of people, but how about someone says, "Jake, I just graduated from college. I'm not exactly sure what I want to do. Like, I don't have case studies, I don't have experience." How about for like that newly grad that like might be interested in marketing or sales or whatever, but they don't know like what team size, or like they're very early
Good
on in their
question.
career.
All right. I love it. The main thing is action creates information. So just take crazy action. Just keep moving. Say yes to many more things, right? I know later in your life you might have tons of opportunities you have to say no to,
Uh-huh.
but just say yes. Like you said, create marketing plans.
Uh-huh.
Look at your college experience. Look at the classes you enjoyed a lot, and just start doing those things. So instead of
Mhm.
thinking about it from a job title perspective, think about the activities that you like to do, and if you could do those activities at different companies. It's funny. It relates to Beehive a little bit.
Yeah.
Uh, my first gig was at ADP. It was like a startup part of ADP. It's like the payroll company
Uh-huh.
in New York, and I reached out to the head of it, who is Israeli, still Israeli. Obviously, he's back in Israel
Yeah.
now, but he was in New York at the time, and he liked my resume, even though I was applying for a UX position. They ended up creating a role for me, but they liked my resume because I also had created a newsletter. And they were
Nice.
like, "Hey, like it's a startup ish. There was probably 100 people there already, so kind of big, had a lot of funding. But he's like, I would love you to do this UX stuff, but you also have this newsletter, and we want to do that as well." And so
Nice.
it just
Go
like
newsletters.
it just pushed my candidacy up a little bit, and it led to a full-time job. So that's what I'm saying. Like if you're fresh, like what you have is energy. You can
For
take a
sure.
lot of meetings. It's cheap to get around to Israel. Your phone plan is pretty cheap. Your internet's cheaper. just create a lot of action. If you find it fun to run a newsletter, right? You
On
never
Beehive,
know.
only on Beehive.
Only that's the only newsletter platform I know of. So
Yeah, I love that. That's a great piece of advice. I'll give one piece of advice that I think it's like very practical, and I think it's a little bit of a hack in the system. There's a lot of talk in Israel about VCs. Everyone is obsessed with VCs. And a good friend of mine, Andrew Jacobson, basically is like trying to show how VCs like aren't as glamorous as we think they are. I mean, like you see these stories, Wiz selling for $32 billion, which obviously is amazing, a huge win. But like that is, it's an anomaly, right, in the VC world. Um, what you should use VCs for if you're applying to jobs is not necessarily applying for an analyst or an associate position, unless like you really are passionate about working at VC. But I think people that are in high tech or that are interested in getting into high tech reach out to people at VC funds, tell them a little bit about yourself, like, and basically, I've had my resume when I was looking for jobs. I basically had a conversation with a VC. They said, send me a little draft on what you are and what you can offer, and I will forward that out to all my portfolio companies. So instead of reaching out to like 30 individual companies, you could reach out to one VC. They'll reach out to like 20 or 30 of their portfolio companies, and they're incentivized to help you, right? If they think that you are, an ambitious and driven individual that could bring value, they want to see their startup succeeding. So they'll gladly put you in front of their startups. And an intro coming from a VC is going to be taken pretty seriously, as opposed to like a cold outreach or someone even coming from an employee. People are going to be listening to the people that are writing the checks. So that to me, and like I've had lots of conversations from that. That would be my like most practical tactical goal for high tech in Israel, especially.
I would say yes and one up that even more because
Let's do it. One
you're
up me.
going into the VC mindset. You're saying they don't want to be perceived as someone who just gives money to startups. They want to be perceived as they're always adding value.
Mhm.
If you say, "Hey, I want to write an article or many articles on the different companies that you funded," it just explains the company or whatever.
Mm,
Can you put me in touch? So that's a really nice way. I did that a few times as well, and they are thrilled that you're writing content about their company.
I love that. I love that. It
That way
comes back
he can reach out and you're immediately adding value and they're gonna repost that and retweet that and 'cause that's great for them.
100%. I think it comes down to just adding a ton of value without the expectation of anything in return. But that will likely lead to you getting paid either on a full-time employee basis, a contract basis, whatever it is.
This was good,
Cool.
man. I
It
learned a
was
lot.
good. Me too. I think we covered a lot of bases here. We talked about Torah, we talked about tech, we talked a lot about Israel, and I think this is good. I think this is a good format. What would be fun? Also, we could think about this. Maybe if anyone has ideas or listening, is like a rapid fire at like the end of each episode. I always like that, like a rapid fire type of thing. Um, so maybe we could do something like that based off of the topic. I don't know if you have any ideas. Maybe ChatGPT has some ideas too. We just did an episode on X. Give us some rapid fire topics, but we could say that for next time.
Absolutely. I'm already thinking about some fun things to dive into. I want to get
Awesome.
to the emojis in Israel. We'll talk about
Yes.
that.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
We'll talk about even we were saying brachot. I think it'll be interesting to get into reincarnations.
Mm.
I'm sure you probably weren't thinking we're going that direction, but
Got to strap my seatbelt on before we take off in the spaceship and go flying here.
yeah, absolutely. But join the community or just I don't know. I guess we'll post this on all platforms. People can comment there, and then we'll get those questions going.
Amazing. Amazing. Thank you, Jake. Thank you, everyone listening. This was a lot of fun.
Thanks, Alec. Talk to you soon.
Awesome. Bye, everyone.